In today's passage, Daniel 2, it is said that God knows all the secrets of this world and reveals them to his servants. Isaiah the prophet tells us the fundamental difference between idols and God. Idols are created by human hands and are therefore empty and lifeless. God, however, has vast wisdom, intelligence, cunning, and talent, and is the one who knows the secret things and the future. He is the one who reveals the secret things and the future to his servants. In the text, the king of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar, had a dream. And the dream was so serious that he was troubled to the point that he could not sleep. It was the 2nd year of Nebuchadnezzar's reign. Nebuchadnezzar, who was so troubled by the dream that he could not sleep, called charlatans, soothsayers, fortune-tellers, and Chaldeans to find out the dream. In verses 2 and 3, it says, "So the king summoned the magicians, enchanters, sorcerers and astrologers to tell him what he had dreamed. When they came in and stood before the king, 3. He said to them, I have had a dream that troubles me and I want to know what it means." Then the Babylonian sages told the king. In verse 4 of the text, "Then the astrologers answered the king, See, may the king live forever. Tell your servants the dream, and we will interpret it." In response to this, Nebuchadnezzar said in verses 5, 6, "This is what I have firmly decided. If you do not tell me what my dream was and interpret it, I will have you cut into pieces and your houses turned into piles of rubble." 6 But if you tell me the dream and explain it, you will receive from me gifts and rewards and great honor. So tell me the dream and interpret it for me. So the Babylonian magicians said in verse 7, "Let the king tell his servants the dream, and we will interpret it." Normally, when a dreamer told a dream, the magicians interpreted the dream by looking at the liver of an animal, or observing the movement of the constellations. But Nebuchadnezzar did not teach the dream, but told the interpretation along with the dream. So in verse 9, he said, "So then, tell me the dream, and I will know that you can interpret it for me. And if they do not do this, they will be split in two and their houses will be turned into a pile of manure." So the wise men and magicians of Babylon were very confused. So they asked the king to tell them the dream again. Then Nebuchadnezzar said firmly, "You are buying time to concoct absurd lies. So if you do not tell me the dream right away, you will die." The wise men and magicians then argued with King Nebuchadnezzar. How can a human understand the dream that the king has had? No king has ever told a dream and ordered it to be understood. Only God can know the dream that the king has had. What we can see here is that the wise men and sages of Babylon are each servants of God. So, when the king asks them to tell him the content of the dream without telling him the content of the dream, and threatens to kill them if they cannot figure it out, they should naturally ask for help from their gods and pray to them. So, they should try to find out the king's dream through communication with the gods. If they were people who communicated with the gods they worshipped, they would have done so. But they don't even think about seeking the gods, even though their lives are at stake. What do you mean? They didn't communicate with the gods on a regular basis. And all the things they claimed to be divine were false. They pretended to be divine while they were fortune-telling with their talents. Why did Nebuchadnezzar ask the wise men to tell him the content of the dream without telling him the content of the dream? Was it because he forgot the dream he had? Or is he purposely not telling them the dream? Judging from Nebuchadnezzar's attitude, it seems that he was clearly aware of the content of the dream he had. So why did he not tell the wise men about it? Was it because he had forgotten the dream he had? Or was he deliberately not telling them about it? It seems that he was clearly aware of the content of the dream he had. First, Nebuchadnezzar says that he is so troubled by the dream that he cannot sleep. If he did not know the content of the dream, he would not have had to worry. However, if he knew the content of the dream, but did not know the interpretation, it might not be clear. He just knew it vaguely, which made him even more troubled. In addition, the attitude that Nebuchadnezzar showed to the wise men gives the impression that he knew the content of the dream. This is because verse 8 says, "Do not try to buy time," and verse 9 says, "If you tell your dreams, you can trust the interpretation." Then, why did Nebuchadnezzar not tell his dream, but instead threaten the wise men of Babylon with death to tell them the dream and its interpretation? It is probably because the content of the dream he had was of a very serious revelatory nature. Ordinary dreams were enough for the wise men to interpret, whether they got it right or not. But this dream was so serious that he thought the interpretation had to be clear. Therefore, they thought that it was not enough to interpret the dream as they pleased. After hearing the content of the dream, at least, they thought that they needed the wisdom to know the content of the dream in order to accurately interpret the dream. So they thought that he was not telling the content of the dream. In addition, Nebuchadnezzar seems to have wanted to find out whether the words of the wise men were credible on this occasion. The wise men who had been living off the taxes provided by Nebuchadnezzar had boasted that they were supernatural beings. They have boasted that they can know everything that happens in the world, and that they will find out everything they do not know through their gods. Nebuchadnezzar seems to have planned to get rid of all the false wise men who were full of hot air. That is why he said in verse 9, "So then, tell me the dream, and I will know that you can interpret it for me." He is saying that he cannot believe the sincerity of what the wise men are saying. Moreover, when the wise men said, "God knows, we do not," King Nebuchadnezzar was furious and ordered them all to be killed, confirming that there was nothing more to expect from them. When the king's order was issued, the wise men and magicians of Babylon were killed, and Daniel and his 3 friends were also sought to be killed. First, only God can show the exact meaning of a dream. When Arioch, the captain of the king's guard, went out to kill the wise men of Babylon, he met Daniel. Daniel learns from the captain of the guard Arioch that the king has given an order to kill the wise men and enchanters who have not been able to interpret the dream. So Daniel goes before King Nebuchadnezzar and says in verse 16, "And asked for time, so that he might interpret the dream for him." Daniel then went back to his house and prayed to God with his 3 friends about this matter. This is because only God can reveal the secret things. In verse 28, it says, "For only the God of heaven can reveal the secret things." This is because of this time. Why were the wise men, magicians, astrologers, and fortune-tellers of Babylon unable to figure out the dream and interpretation of King Nebuchadnezzar? It is because only God in heaven can reveal the secret things. In verse 27, it says, Daniel replied, "No wise man, enchanter, magician or diviner can explain to the king the mystery he has asked about." And why was Daniel chosen? Was it because he was more wise than the others? No. In verse 30, it says, "As for me, this mystery has been revealed to me, not because I have greater wisdom than anyone else alive, but so that your majesty may know the interpretation, and that you may understand what went through your mind." God allows us to dream and forget, and reveals and hides secrets according to his deep plan. So what should we do? We should realize God's work and live according to his will. In other words, if God hides something, we should live as it is hidden, and if God reveals something, we should do our best in it as it is revealed. So, what should we do? We should realize that all interpretations are in God's hands, and leave the interpretation of our lives to God. We should also realize that all management is in God's hands, and manage our lives according to God's management. Second, God revealed the dream of Nebuchadnezzar and its meaning through Daniel. In verse 19, it says, "During the night, the mystery was revealed to Daniel in a vision. Then Daniel praised the God of heaven. God showed Daniel, who was praying, the dream that Nebuchadnezzar had dreamed, and its interpretation in a vision." Nebuchadnezzar's dream, revealed through Daniel, was an esoteric one, whose meaning could not be known without divine interpretation. Nebuchadnezzar saw a great idol in his dream. The head of the idol was pure gold, the chest and arms were silver. The belly and legs were brass. The calves were iron, and the feet were iron and clay. Nebuchadnezzar in the dream was looking at the idol when a stone that was not touched flew in from somewhere and hit the feet of the idol made of iron and clay, causing the idol to collapse in an instant, and pure gold, silver, brass, and iron disappeared without a trace, as if they were chaff in a summer threshing. And the uncarved stone that destroyed the idol gradually grew to become a large mountain, which eventually filled the whole world. This was the dream of Nebuchadnezzar revealed through Daniel. Daniel interprets the golden head as symbolizing Nebuchadnezzar. the King of Kings. The God of heaven gave him the kingdom, power, authority, and glory. And even all of nature was put under Nebuchadnezzar's rule. So the pure gold head must be King Nebuchadnezzar. In addition, the silver chest and arms are interpreted as the nation that will follow Nebuchadnezzar, and will be a little less powerful than Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom. Daniel then interpreted that a new, strong nation would emerge, such as a belly and thighs of bronze. Then, he said that another new nation would emerge, such as calves and feet of iron. This nation would be strong like iron and would conquer and destroy all nations. Then, he said that a nation would emerge whose toes would be partly made of iron and partly of clay. He interpreted that the nation would be divided and would also be crushed. And finally, he said that an uncut stone would emerge, which would symbolize the nation that God would establish, and that the nation would crush all nations and stand tall above them to become an eternal nation. However, Daniel did not say what kind of nation would emerge after Nebuchadnezzar. However, looking at history, it is generally interpreted as follows. First, the head of pure gold symbolizes the Babylonian Empire. The Babylonian Empire, which dominated the world from 612 to 539 BCE, was an ancient civilization so advanced that it was represented by a golden head. However, Daniel revealed that God was sitting on a throne much higher than the king's throne in the presence of the great monarch Nebuchadnezzar. Daniel equated the king with the empire, saying that King Nebuchadnezzar was that golden head. He prophesied that Babylon would become a global empire. And as Daniel's prophecy, Babylon expanded its territory enormously, defeating the surrounding powers during the 43 years of Nebuchadnezzar's reign. However, Daniel clearly states that the status, power, and glory of King Nebuchadnezzar did not come from his own abilities, but from God, the master of history. Babylon's power declined rapidly after the death of King Nebuchadnezzar, and it was destroyed in about 70 years. Second, the silver chest and arms symbolize the Median Empire. Persia succeeded Babylon and dominated the world for nearly 200 years from 539 BC to 330 AD. The silver chest and arms symbolize Persia. Originally, Media always dominated Persia, but this was reversed in an instant, and Media was absorbed into Persia and unified. That person was the famous conqueror King Cyrus. Cyrus the Great built his empire through 3 great wars of conquest over Babylon, Lydia, and Egypt. King Cyrus had a tolerant policy that respected the culture and religion of Babylon and other conquered territories. He allowed a large number of Israelites, who had been taken as prisoners, to return to Jerusalem. And his relatively tolerant policies allowed the glory of Persia to last for more than 200 years, 3 times longer than that of Babylon. Third, the nailed ship and the flat bottom symbolize the Hellenistic Empire. The characteristic of a brass-like country here is that it rules the whole world. The Hellenistic Empire, which began with the rise of Alexander the Great, dominated the world for 270 years from 333 BC to 63 AD. All the empires that had existed up to that point were empires that originated in the east, such as Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, and Persia. However, the Hellenistic Empire was the first empire to originate in Europe in the west and spread to the east. Alexander the Great ascended the throne at the young age of 23 and conquered all of the territories of the Persian Empire in 10 years. However, Alexander died at the young age of 33. After that, his empire was divided among 4 of his subordinates. The characteristic of the Hellenic Empire was fusion. Alexander the Great mixed the Oriental culture of the East with the Greek culture to create the Hellenic culture, the greatest civilization of the ancient world. Fourth, the Iron Bridge symbolizes the Roman Empire. The calf is the part of the human body where the strongest force is expressed. Iron Legs refers to Rome, the 4th empire that emerged in earnest around 63 BC and conquered the world. The reason why the Romans, who were no better than other peoples, were able to dominate the world for more than 500 years was because of their tolerance policy. They lasted so long because they tried to absorb everything from hostile countries, occupied countries, and friendly countries and tried to embrace and learn. However, the great empire of Rome, which seemed to be eternal, finally collapsed in 476 AD due to the invasion of the Germanic tribes. The fifth, feet and toes of iron and clay, symbolize the nations that will exist until the end of the world. In this way, God is the master of this whole world. All things that kings and empires are established are under the sovereignty of God. 3. Third, what kind of dream did King Nebuchadnezzar have? It was a dream about the nations of the world and the eternal God's kingdom that will be established in the future. The stone that is cut out of the mountain is about the God's kingdom that will rise after the Roman Empire. This God's kingdom will be established through the first coming of Jesus and will be completed with the second coming of Jesus. Then, what kind of kingdom is God's kingdom that will be established through Jesus? In verse 44 of today's passage, it says, "In the time of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed, nor will it be left to another people. It will crush all those kingdoms and bring them to an end, but it will itself endure forever." And the completion of this God's kingdom is described in verse 45. This is the meaning of the vision of the rock cut out of a mountain, but not by human hands, a rock that broke the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver and the gold to pieces. So, the worldly kingdoms will all collapse and eventually a perfect God's kingdom will be established. In other words, the sovereignty of the worldly kingdom will change, but the sovereignty of the God's kingdom will not change. The God's kingdom, which is established through Jesus, will not be destroyed forever. The officials of the Babylonian court, including the king, would not have understood the interpretation of Daniel's dream. However, they were completely overwhelmed by the majesty, glory, and wisdom of God that flowed through Daniel. So the king fell on his face. In verses 46 and 47, then King Nebuchadnezzar fell prostrate before Daniel and paid him honor and ordered that an offering and incense be presented to him. 47 The king said to Daniel, "Surely your God is the God of gods and the Lord of kings and a revealer of mysteries, for you were able to reveal this mystery." King Nebuchadnezzar did not surrender to Daniel, but surrendered completely before Daniel's God. The king gave Daniel wealth, honor, and power. 48-49 Then the king placed Daniel in a high position and lavished many gifts on him. He made him ruler over the entire province of Babylon and placed him in charge of all its wise men. 49 Moreover, at Daniel's request the king appointed Shadrach, Meshach and Abednego administrators over the province of Babylon, while Daniel himself remained at the royal court. 18-year-old Daniel was made the head of all the wise men in Babylon. Daniel asked the king to appoint 3 friends of faith as ministers to help him govern Babylon, and the king agreed. What is the world revealed by Nebuchadnezzar's dream and Daniel's interpretation of the dream? It is a place with an unstable structure. Ultimately, it will lead to destruction. In other words, it is a structure in which heavy things are placed on top of each other from the head of the statue. And the bottom is made of mud and iron that can only be broken and collapsed with a little impact. So how can such a statue last long? The statue is unstable and will break down in a short time. The current world is just like this statue. The current world is very unstable and will collapse in the near future. Therefore, the world will eventually come to ruin. Throughout history, all the countries of the world have collapsed. Babylon, which was as brilliant as gold, Persia, which was as silver, Greece, which was as dazzling as brass, and Rome, which was as strong as steel, all eventually came to an end. This shows that all of these countries were unstable. In addition, not only the nations of the world, but the world itself will also come to an end, just as the nations of the world have come to an end. The statue in Nebuchadnezzar's dream signified that the empires of Babylon, Persia, Greece, and Rome were indeed strong. It seemed as if no one could destroy them. But as time passed, they all collapsed. On the surface, the empires of the world seem to be great and their power to be overwhelming, but in reality, they are all just a facade and nothing more. It is foolish to fear something that is so empty and worthless. We must face the reality of this world squarely. Therefore, we must clearly understand what we should desire and what we should fear. The kingdom we should truly desire is the eternal kingdom of God, who will destroy the world with a rock and come to earth. We should fear God, who created the world and gave life to people, who governs the rise and fall of the world, and governs the life and death, fortune and misfortune of people. Only then will our lives be truly valuable and meaningful. Today, the world is following an evil and immoral world, forsaking God. God is not being revered, nature and the environment are not being respected, and individuals, regions, nations, and countries are fighting for their own interests, causing the earth to suffer and becoming like a terminal cancer patient. Therefore, the climate change disaster is irreversible and unrecoverable. The Arctic ice is disappearing, and the average temperature of the ocean has risen by 2 degrees. On land, temperatures are rising by more than 50 degrees and scorching heat is appearing. Tropical cyclones are becoming more frequent, and forest fires, typhoons, and heavy rains are occurring more frequently. In addition, the risk of earthquakes and volcanic eruptions is increasing. The movement that is accelerating this catastrophe is the spread of PC culture, which is political correctness that seeks to erase the Bible and Christian culture. It is pushing for comprehensive anti-discrimination laws and freedom of personal choice regarding sexual identity, based on such anti-biblical sentiments, while pushing God out of the human world and trying to take his place. It is trying to force its way by saying that men and women are not determined by God, but by humans themselves. As they pursue a world without God, they are experiencing a world without God's grace and mercy. This confusion will be shattered by the return of Jesus, the living stone, and the eternal and perfect kingdom of God will be established. That was the future of the earth's history that King Nebuchadnezzar saw. And now is the time for the return of Jesus, the living stone that King Nebuchadnezzar saw for the last time. I pray that you will be raised up as a person of faith who is ready with oil like the 5 wise virgins before the return of Jesus.